Right, I believe we're all here. Welcome to the first of this year's meeting of the Audit and Accounts Committee. It still includes governance, but not in the title. We are not expecting any fire alarms or normal fire alarm drills. So if there are no normal fire alarm drills, the fire alarm will be genuine if it goes off. If we move to the agenda of this, the 30th of June 2014, the first item is apologies for absence and substitutes. Since we're all here, there are none. Thank you. 2, declarations of interest. Councillor Parker.
Chair, just one of the papers on the agenda. It would be only right for me to declare that I was the council's appointed representative to Fairfields Arts Centre prior to this last council meeting, but there was some interest.
Thank you.
I just want it noted, because better to say it than not say it.
No, that is noted. Are there any other interests? In which case I will declare some interests. I've declared it in the past. I'm a supporter of Solve. I'm a trustee of Basingstoke Common, and I farm to the east of Basingstoke, so therefore I have an interest in land. Item 3, urgent matters. I'm not... Councillor Parker.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, you've had emails from me with regard to the issue of ethical investment, and I made a request that that could be added to this agenda because of the importance under the special circumstance, in as much that we are going to be making appointment of new fund managers, and I wanted this issue, this item, not to be deferred any further than is necessary. This is a crucial stage at which we should have at least had the opportunity to discuss and agree the terms of reference for the single issue panel that was appointed previously on this committee.
Thank you. If we look at page 6 of 235 at the bottom, Councillor Parker, Councillor Harvey, Councillor Cherritt. Can I ask the officers if they've heard back from those three, if they're happy to continue?
Haven't heard back from Councillor Harvey, and Councillor Cherritt says, I will do my best to contribute, but likewise will defer to others if they wish.
So, Councillor Parker?
Should I?
Sorry, yes, please.
I have no personal objection to Councillor Harvey or Councillor Cherritt. In fact, they both gave valuable input. But I had a general presumption that members of that panel would be members of the Audit Committee. Now, if that's not a requirement, then we at least need one more appointee. But I had made a presumption. Again, that was why I suggested that we should be seeking new members. My email to you, Councillor Chair. So you might want to, somebody might want to tell me that it hasn't got to be members of Audit.
I'll ask the officer to clarify, please.
I think a couple of things. I think the terms of reference have been agreed for that single issue panel, and the intention was that those terms of reference remain. There wasn't a requirement for them to come back to the committee. They were set up, and that panel was working on the single issue. As you say, membership has changed. I think the intention of the chair is under item 7, which is the committee work programme, is to ask the committee to make appointments or to confirm appointments to that single issue panel. And also that item will discuss the timing of the report coming back to this committee.
Councillor Parker?
Sorry, Chair, you will understand my persistence when I've been plugging at this for 8 years. I have to try and take opportunity of when we're actually talking about this issue. I was not under the understanding that the terms of reference had been agreed. We had a first meeting with our support officer, Andrew Hunter, where we discussed, we'd had email dialogue, that's Councillor Cherritt, Councillor Harvey and myself, and the support officer, Andrew Hunter, we had a first meeting where we agreed in broad principle. The recommendation to this committee is that then they would have further discussion, and that was for an opportunity for any other expansion, because there was a suggested expansion to the criteria, to be discussed and finally approved by this committee. So I don't understand how we've moved from my last meeting as a panel member, where we in principle agreed the terms of reference with an understanding, myself, that it would come, those principles would have final approval of this committee, and committee members would have an opportunity to make some suggestions themselves.
Thank you. I'm not sure I can add much more other than I think that was, as I understood the case, was that those terms of reference had been discussed by the group. The group had been mandated in effect by this committee previously and by council in the area of ethical investment to look at the policy, and it had gone away and had started that work. It's obviously not a piece of work that can be done quickly. It has major implications, and it needs to be, as you understand, you're on the panel, it needs to be worked through, and then the report comes back to this committee. So, as I say, my understanding, I think it was the understanding from the support officer as well, although I don't want to put words into his mouth, that the terms of reference, it wasn't anticipated that those were going to come back to this committee again, in that you're working to them, and the report would come back that dealt with the issue of ethical investment as the panel saw fit for the committee to consider. So I think that's the reason why there isn't an item on this agenda for terms of reference, because the panel is working on those terms of reference to deliver that strategy.
Thank you for your indulgence, Chair. This is the frustration that I have, Chair, is that, and I want to be very careful in my choice of words, I don't understand the apparent resistance to this, my attempts to try and get this as part of council policy. There are well-proven, well-documented model wordings for ethical investment. At the meeting that we had as a panel, it was agreed that whilst the work subject was expanded at the request of Councillor Harvey to incorporate procurement and other general issues, it was agreed at that point in time that we would pursue as a priority, and that was the word used, the question of ethical investment. And I made reference to and gave copy of the Hampshire County Council pension scheme that has a stance on ethical investment. That in itself could have been adopted today without, well, I mean, it could have been offered to committee members to be adopted today. And I would make the point, if it's good enough for officers' pension scheme to have a stance on ethical investment, then why do our ratepayers not have similar in regard to the investment of their funds? And here we are again. What we're going to have now is, got a situation, this is now being deferred until supposedly the next committee in September, when in June we appoint new fund managers. That appointment of those fund managers should be made with an understanding that this local authority has got an ethical investment policy.
My understanding is there's no deferral. The three councillors, Councillor Parker, Harvey and Chat, have already done good work on this. They've already gone some way down the road. I was hoping they could complete their work, get an officer paper, and the officer paper come back to this committee. Now, if I made big assumptions that were incorrect there, please clarify, but that was what I made the assumption was going to happen. And there is one minor error on the bottom of page 6 of 235. It says that a subcommittee, it should say single issue. Apologies for that. On the resolve that a single issue panel of the Audit, Governance and Accounts Committee. So the way I understand it is those three councillors, and if they wish to have more councillors, please ask, it doesn't necessarily have to come through the committee, to create a paper with the officers, that the paper that can then come to this committee, and this committee can then discuss it and hopefully push it through. Certainly.
just to clarify the process on that as well, it isn't a decision that this committee can make in terms of agreeing a ethical policy or not agreeing an ethical policy. It's a full council decision. So obviously this committee would be making a reference on to full council for decision, in effect as an amendment to the Treasury Management Policy that full council agreed in February. So there are some steps that would be required, and I understand Councillor Parker's frustration. It's not but you know, this is a process that requires some time. The panel is working on it, and as I say, I think the chair is intending to discuss the timing of this, which would be the next meeting of this committee. So that will be well before the Treasury Management Strategy for next year is in place.
I acknowledge what's been said, and I stepped down from it, but I would just want to add to Kevin's comment, that will then be after we possibly allocated funds without an ethical investment stance.
Move back to the agenda on item
Sorry,
three.
Chair, and I'd like that to be noted.
I'll ask the, thank you, it's noted. If we move back to agenda, item 3, urgent matters. I'm not aware of any others. Item 4, appointment of vice chairman. I'm open to the floor. Councillor Frost.
I appoint Councillor Robert Tate as Vice Chair.
And we have a seconder. Thank you, Donald. Councillor Keating.
Thank you, Chair. I'm hoping he would accept. I would like to nominate Councillor Parker as Vice Chair. Thank you.
Councillor Parker, would you like to speak?
Yes, Chair, I'm not prepared to take the position. Thank you.
Do we have any more nomination? Councillor Tilbury. So we have a nomination for Councillor Keating, proposed by Councillor Tilbury and seconded by Councillor Parker. So we have 2 nominations on the table. Any other nominations? In which case we have a straight vote between Councillor Tate and Councillor Keating. Councillor Tate, you were nominated first. All those in favour of Councillor Tate? 4. Councillor Keating? 4. Okay, right. Councillor Tate. I had hoped to avoid having the chair as a casting vote. Councillor Tate, would you like to come up here?
Chair. If it's any help, I know you just made that ruling, but since the council is no overall control, what you've just done is given almost overall control to the minority leadership, minority administration, and therefore I might suggest that the use of the casting vote actually should have gone the other way, because you've weighted the committee towards the minority administration, and the casting vote, in my understanding, and this goes back to I've forgotten his name now, Lord Citrine's, yes, it's 1926, but Lord Citrine's definition of casting vote, which is not how you've operated it. I'd like that comment noted, but that would have been an alternative.
It is noted, and we are on webcast, so we'll be on that as well. Councillor Tate, would you like to come up, please? Right, we now move on to paper A, which is item 5, which is the minutes of the previous meeting. You all should have in front of you. We have already looked at the bottom of page 6 of 235 and changed subcommittee to single issue.
Yeah, okay.
I've been reminded that for future reference, where things are asked to be noted, this is by the will of the committee, so the committee has to agree. That's for future reference. Councillor?
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask, are we at the point, I'm never certain about, when we're looking at the past minutes, are we at a point where I can ask whether an item that was noted to be actioned, whether that's been actioned?
Due to the changeover, not normally, but I'll allow it tonight because we are a new committee. Because we might all be interested in this as well. So please carry on.
Sorry, I'm not certain. All I'm trying to do is on the minutes.
Yep.
There was an item which said, which is on page 8 of 235. This is the report of the minutes.
Yep.
It says that members provide a written response. And I wanted to ask, have I missed it? And if so, I'd like to see a copy of the written response. I'm sure it happened, but we've had elections in between time.
Thank you very much for bringing it up. I believe if you've got that in front of you, Kevin, are you able to read? Kevin's drafted letter, which I have signed for Karen, because Karen did the previous chair. And I'll hand over to Kevin to remember what was in the letter.
Thank you, Chair. It was based on Councillor Cherritt's response, which I think she did copy into all members, but I'm perfectly happy to, and the new chair has signed the letter and it's got off to the DWP. I'm happy to circulate it to members after the meeting.
I just wanted to be certain that we'd done it, and yes, if it's now formalised as a letter signed by the chair of this committee, then yes, committee members should see a copy.
Right, so on paper 8, if we could agree that they are factually correct, please. All those in agreement? Thank you, so I can sign them. Okay, I'll sign them at the end. So move on to paper item 6. Well, item 6, I believe, is as on the agenda. I don't think there's much more to say about item 6. In which case, that's quick. Item 7, committee work programme. I believe we do have a handout here. I'll just give you a couple minutes or a minute and piece to read it. Members, I'll ask the officer just to quickly go through it.
Thank you, Chairman. Those of you who were at the training from the external auditor will recognise some of these areas, or those members that have been on the committee previously. As a sort of quasi-regulatory committee, this committee has a number of regular style reports, and what we've done here for discussion is programme those in to the sequence of meetings that take us up to this municipal year. So, for example, there will be the regular Treasury Management monitoring reports at each meeting. At the relevant meetings, there will be the internal audit progress reports, which update on the internal audit reports. At the appropriate time in the year, so that tends to be November and February, there's the Treasury Management strategy, and we've had some reference to that earlier in coming to this committee. And then there's the reports from the external auditor that come in September and in April, and things like the statement of account. So it's a sequence of areas that are made up from those regular reports. members will note, and we've discussed this earlier on, the ethical investment item is on for the 22nd of September, the next meeting. And the various other reports from the external auditors, like the external audit grant report in February. So it's an agenda that reflects what the committees needs to look at from previously and takes on board the regulatory role that the committee has, particularly around the internal audit and the treasury management. I've also put on the bottom just some of the training sessions that we will look to set up for members. So the role of an audit committee, statement of accounts, risk management and treasury management. Those would be the types of sessions that we'll be looking to run for the committee, or for the committee members and for reserve members.
The role of the audit committee we've had already, that was in the main chamber. Statement of accounts, we've had a minor one today, but we'll have a major one later on. Risk management, treasury management still to happen. Councillor Keating.
Thank you, Chair. In addition to this, I think it would be helpful to have the audit issues that are going to be examined this year identified, so that we could, first of all, anticipate and ensure that if there is something that we have a major concern about, that we should highlight it early. But it would also give us a very good means by which we could ensure that the spread of the audit work is that which we would endorse. Thank you.
Yes, I mean, the committee's received the audit plan, which lays it out. But yeah, we can certainly add that to this document, which I think, if that's what members would like, so that you can see it has the rough timetable as well, does it, for the audits when they're going to be conducted?
Yes, as Kevin quite rightly pointed out, the audit committee approved the audit plan for this financial year in April, and you'll get your progress to date reports from internal audit, the work we've carried out through the year. You've got, I think, worked out about 3 in the year, so the committee will be obviously kept up to speed with where we are and the issues we're finding and the issues that are being corrected, and those issues that remain outstanding. You will obviously get all that information. And there's a paper 9 on your committee agenda today is a progress report for you to see what it looks like.
It means yes, Councillor Keating. I will, on this particular document, I will superimpose on the main audits that are due.
Councillor Parker.
Thank you, Chair. Two questions. My first question is, this is a prescriptive programme for the committee's work. Where's the note for any ability of flexibility in order to maybe consider something that comes up as an issue that's going to require the committee's attention? And I'm thinking particularly, we used to, I understood, monitor, or at least have detail. It was a subject matter that this committee was interested in, was that of data breaches. And we've had a very significant recent data breach, and this is a subject matter that I think this committee should be giving considerably more attention to, and I don't see it in this programme.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll take that. I think what Kevin set before you members is the main anchors of your work plan. So of course there's flexibility, and the whole principle of this new constitution is that you can establish a work plan for yourself. You just need to be mindful of the workload that you're giving yourself. And members who've previously been on this committee or its former version will know that there is a procedure for if there is a data breach, that this committee is notified and then a confidential report would be received. So we would anticipate that at the 22nd of September meeting would be the time that you would receive that confidential paper in respect of the most recent data breach. But I'm sure Chairman would be pleased to receive any ideas or for items for consideration, and they can be woven in the timetable as time permits.
Looking at this is really the minimum. If we overload ourselves and don't get through, don't do this, it would cause serious problems to the council. So following on from that, please could councillors read the documents before they come, and actually any queries speak to the officers before the day. Hopefully we can get through it and we'll have time for other issues as well. Right, if we now move on to point of SIP. Councillor, I've been reminded, Councillor Parker's point of SIP. I'm making an assumption that 3 members that have already done the work will continue the work, get an officer report back to our next meeting. If there's 3 members want extra help or someone else, I'm sure, I don't know, it was which officer was helping them, sorry?
Andrew Hunter.
Andrew Hunter. I'm sure it could be worked with Andrew Hunter. Councillor Parker.
Thank you, Chair. Could we just be reminded as to what Councillor Cherrett's response was? Because I thought it may implied she would try to assist, but wasn't totally committed. I don't know.
Yeah, Councillor Cherrett said, if I can, I will do my best to contribute, but likewise will defer to others who have made more wish and time to be involved as needed. That's her response.
Councillor Parker.
I actually have to say, to the embarrassment possibly of Councillor Cherrett, half of her attention to the subject matter would be actually well received, but it does worry me slightly in as much that maybe if there was a member of the committee that's present today who would choose to also join that panel, then I would welcome it.
Councillor Pearce.
Thank you. If it's any help, I've sat for 4 years on the TUC Ethical Investment Committee, so.
Donald.
I actually stood in for Councillor Cherrett at one of our meetings, and I'd be very prepared if you'd like me to do so again.
Thank you. We have 2 new councillors that are offering to sit on the committee. Would you be happy with that, having extra help?
Definitely, Chair. I welcome it. And what I would ask is then if possibly the lead officer, who's been very ably assisting us, might be asked to offer a suggested next meeting date to the members of the panel so we can continue with progress.
That's noted. Lead officer. So we'll be sending out to those 3 councillors plus the 2 extra councillors, 5. So the aim is to have an agreed paper back to the 22nd meeting. Right. We now move on to paper B, which is item 8 on the agenda. Implementation of the Independence Governance Report. Paper B. Would you like to introduce it?
Thank you, Chairman. For members new to the committee, this paper tracks the actions that came out of recommendations that have come from 3 pieces of governance work that the council has undertaken in the past year. And those 3 items were the Independence Governance Review undertaken by Ernst & Young, the review of Ernst & Young procurement, which was a paper produced by myself at the request of the committee, and most recently the peer review outcomes. And what's set out here, members, is a table that's in 2 parts, and you can see there's a table which indicates complete work and a table that completes work in progress. So perhaps if I just focus on the work in progress items on page 11, there's one item there which did arise on a couple of the different audits, and that was around member officer relations. And you can see, members, in the last column that's headed Update June 2012, I set out what the original intention was, and member colleagues who are on Constitution Working Party will recall the conversation we had in that how we should take through the member officer relationship piece of work. But that's changed as time has gone on, and most latterly has really improved since the outcome of the peer review. And most recently, SLT, that's the senior leadership team, the chief executive and the two directors have met with group leaders on more than one occasion and discussed how member officer working relationships are progressing. And I can share with you today, members, the view from that group is that really relationships have improved, that work is going well, and that there is a real commitment to continue that there's a positive and respectful relationship between officers and members, a two-way process. So that group would like to suggest that at the moment no further work is needed in that area, but that group leaders and SLT will undertake to continue to review how relationships are over the coming weeks and months. The second piece of work that is in progress is set over the page, and that's around some procurement awareness sessions. Sorry, I muddled that up. And that action's actually in italics because it came out of a different source, but there's no need for you to concern yourself with that. That's from the report that I wrote instead of an auditor wrote. And as you can see there, members, that there are some procurement awareness sessions scheduled for July and August. And it may be that this committee chooses to add it to the briefing sessions that you've already said that you'll have over the next year. So in giving you that feedback, members, you might be minded to think that good progress has been made across all areas of the governance work that we've undertaken over the past year. And there's more detail of that in the annual governance statement that's coming up a little bit later. And I suggest that maybe members might be minded that the committee could or should focus on other areas of interest now, and perhaps be satisfied that the work in this area is at the moment complete, notwithstanding that improvements and further good practice will always be sought.
Thank you. Any comments on paper B, or can we move? Councillor Parker.
Just a couple of points I would like to check with Laura, if I may, through the chair, is that on page 15, there are two items where the review, first of all, the review of appropriateness of the webcast facility. Could we just have a reminder, an update as to the position in relation to that? And secondly, the third item on that page, which is headed document management, I do rather feel that that perhaps should be noted as in progress, because I don't believe that we're at a stage where we can really say that's been complete when the updates of June 2014 says that internal audit to undertake document management audit to ensure system in place. That, therefore, I would suggest that's still in progress.
Thank you, Chair. In terms of the webcast facility, as the report notes, this committee looked at the review. I can say that the replacement equipment has been purchased. I believe it's being trialled at the moment. It goes live with the next council meeting, which will also have some e-voting, I think, as well. So there will be new hardware to support the webcast facility, which would also enable I'm going to get IT speak now, multi-device access, so access from iPads and phones as well as from the web browser. So an upgrade and some more robust hardware. It's been purchased, it's been parallel tested at the moment, and will be live from the next council meeting. Sorry, the other one, well, I'm just going to agree with Councillor Parker that yes, it's in progress. Internal audit will be looking at that element as part of this year's work plan.
Councillor Parker.
So the heading on that should be noted in progress.
Chairman, might I come back? Councillor Parker's spotted the flaw in my plan there, in that really once it's moved on to the internal audit work plan, it doesn't drop off until it's done. I mean, there is no way our internal audit manager would let that one go. So I was just hopeful for the purposes of this report that you would be comfortable that it was in a safe home and would be completed. But if members are minded that they still wish to receive this report at every meeting and see where we are, then of course we can do that.
Chair, knowing how hard Laura and her teams worked on this, I wouldn't want to be so pernickety.
Thank you. Councillor Keating.
Thank you, Chair. We've done a lot of work on this. We don't need full report in future, I'd say. Just the outstanding items that are going to be actioned could probably be separately reported. Thank you.
I think you've got general agreement in the committee with that, yes. In which case, councillors are on paper C. Internal Audit Progress Report. This is January to May of this year. As we go through the papers later on, some aren't this year, some of the other papers. I'll ask Richard to introduce it.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, it says on the tin, this is a report of the internal audit team's work for the period January to May this year. This report format is one that we've used for the last couple of meetings. The idea is to try and focus your attention on what we consider to be the critical issues. So what we have, the first paragraph of my report on page 235, paragraph 4.1, which shows the actual audits that we've completed in that period. There you can see the audit area, the level of assurance that we've given. They are defined obviously further on in my report. I forget which section now, but it's later on. And then the actual number of recommendations that we've issued from those audits, split between fundamental, significant and merits attentions. Obviously, we wish to focus your attention on the fundamental and significant areas. So we have the appendices 2 to 10, which for your information is the summary report from each of those audits that was undertaken. Then in the body of the report, you'll see paragraph 4.2, we list the overdue fundamental recommendations. Obviously, these are the ones that we consider to be top priority and flagged down with a colour red on our audit reports. And so there you can see the ones that are overdue according to the requirements set by Audit Committee. So you will see, I think for existing members, I think these are ones you've all seen before. I don't think they're anything new, but what I would say is the number of red ones, fundamentals that have been that are on this report have been significantly reduced from last quarter, last period's report. So the head of commissioning has done fair play to a fair amount of work on getting those recommendations signed off to our satisfaction. Then you'll see the other ones relating to contract management and the Worthing Road Cemetery is still outstanding. The other area I'll point you to is Appendix 1 of the report, which lists the overdue significance, the ones that we flag up as orange, the ones that we give officers a little more time to comply with because they're not quite so critical, but they still represent a risk to the control environment. And the merits attention ones, we don't report on them. They are sort of points of process or procedure, which we really don't want to worry the committee with all of them. So that fundamentally is what we've undertaken in this year and where we are with the recommendations. We have a pretty robust follow-up process for recommendations. Once we make them, agree them with the officers and heads of service, we then follow them up on a monthly basis. Officers, as Laura will attest to, receive regular emails saying, why haven't you done this yet? And we incorporate them into our database. Well, I say database, it's a big spreadsheet, but which then feed into this report. So for the summary information, that's it. I'm happy to take any questions.
Councillor Pearce?
Thank you. A specific question on audit reference 3.8B on page 29 of 235. I have two questions. The first question is, what do you mean by an employment vetting scheme? And the second question is, the whole of the comment under action agreed is not in there. It says, I believe that responsibility for initiating the scheme. So I'd like to know what the rest of that comment is as well, please. It's 29 of 235.
Top of the page of 29, yeah?
Yes, Chair.
Try as we might in the formatting this document to make sure all the information's there. It has been just cut off in the column. I haven't got the additional information to hand, but we can happily supply you with the missing text.
And my other question, Chair? Well, what do you mean by an employment vetting scheme?
This is for new employees, part of the recruitment process, vetting. I believe it's for like the old CRB checks and everything, the usual employment checks that are undertaken.
You're absolutely sure it's only a question of DBS check? There's no other positive vetting or security vetting taking place?
Thank you, Chair. What we're looking to do is to introduce a process where we can verify professional qualifications of members of staff to ensure that they are their application form is legitimate, or the successful candidate, sorry. So there'll be the DBS check, CRB, the professional qualification check. So they're the areas we're actually concentrating on.
So can I have an assurance that those are the only areas, Chair?
If this is the audit committee, I think HR would be a better committee to actually take that question to. I don't really want two committees doing the same thing, because I have sat on HR and we do have some issues there.
I'm sorry, I don't agree. I don't wish to disagree, but I think it's relevant for both committees. All I've asked for is an assurance that that vetting scheme only includes the items mentioned. I don't think that's a difficult thing
The
to ask.
officer's nodding and says he can do that. No problem.
We can get back to you, yes.
Councillor Keating.
I'm seriously concerned on page 23 of 235. Item 4.3 talks about overdue significant recommendations. Now, when any member of an audit committee sees a report that says, of the 22 significant recommendations within the audit report, 22 of them are overdue, i.e. they've not been implemented in the timetable agreed, that is concerning. It must be of concern. Significant is one down from the worst possible. Worst possible is fundamental. Significant has a value in audit committee terms which says it needs to be done, and it needs to be done properly, and it needs to be done in accordance with the rules, and in my view, needs to be done in time. That's the first point I wanted to make, Chair. The second point I wanted to make was that if you read the report, as I have, and bearing in mind the significant training that we had last week, many of the responses under the heading latest update could be categorized as reassuring people that we're doing something, but could not be categorized, in my view, as evidence, because they're opinions. And for example, and I mean just for example, the first one is on page whatever it is, 26 of 235. 235, by the way, is a book. It's book-sized. 4.7, corporate governance. And I know Laura's here, and I acknowledge that. But the target date was June last year, and the update does not give a completion date. So it's a year late, and we don't have a completion date. Now, I can read what the director has said, and I can understand the words. But as an auditor, a member of the audit committee, I would look for a completion date, an actual completion date. It's a year late, we're going to complete it by. And many of the responses, and I don't just mean the head of commissioning or the director of governance, many of the responses do not provide evidence of when we're intending or will complete. And I won't go any further, but if you want me to give you further examples, I can assure you I will. Thank you.
I'll ask the officer to comment on what you said.
Thank you, Chair. The reason why we don't give up a new completion date is because we don't want other officers to fall into that trap of, oh, well, I've now got until September to complete it. So that's the only reason why we give the original target date. You can clearly see it's overdue. We bring it to the committee here so you can see it's clearly overdue. But again, it's that we don't want to give any officer another excuse to have another deadline to not meet.
Councillor Tilbury.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, my questions relate to pages 39 and 40. This relates to developers' contributions. And particularly on page 40, it's the second paragraph there, integrity of financial and planning systems information, and it suggests that a direct reconciliation between finance and planning systems will be an effective way to ensure accuracy of financial information. This came out about a couple of months back now. I was asked by a parish council in Overton to how much Section 106 money was still around. I said, well, off the top of my head, very little actually. But I went and checked the system, and I found that in my ward there was over £1 million for affordable housing, and a load of other very large sums of money. And when I looked at them, the money for affordable housing was for Laverstoke Mill, which wasn't going to be built because that plan had been scrapped and it's now being turned into a gin distillery. There was also money in there for a house that wasn't going to be built. The problem is that no one seems to update these systems, and so the finance department are under the delusion that someone's going to give them a load of money at some point, or it may be available, when in reality these planning applications are really no longer valid, and there seemed to be no way that this was being passed back to the appropriate departments there. And it was it wasn't the first time. I raised this about 5 or 6 years ago when we had the Overt Neil developments in Overt, where there was two applications were passed on the same night to build 60 houses and 99 on the same site, and unsurprisingly the developer built the 99 one. The problem was we then found that when we were asking how much Section 106 money there was, the two have been added together because they assumed that both would be built, because they go on the spreadsheet and they assume they're both going to happen. Well, obviously you can't build two sites on the same, two different developments on the same site unless you double decker them or something or put them underground. But it was never going to happen. But this doesn't get picked up, and that's just in my ward, which is relatively small. So I wonder if the officers are, is there anything we can do with this to try and make this information actually valid? Because there's no point having these spreadsheets that tell us that we go and look at and say, we've got this money to spend. When you start looking into it, there wasn't, it implied there was like £1 million there, and it just didn't exist.
Which officer would like to... Oh, look.
I think all glances came to me there, Chairman. In terms of... I think the report notes that that finance, we have as you say, we have a system of reconciling and controlling the financial Section 106s that we receive and that we're expected to receive. there is closer working than there had been previously, and I think that's recognised in here as well, because there is a corporate working group that looks at Section 106. So some information flow the information flow between the departments has improved, and I think that's an area where it can improve further on these agreements. We obviously don't add, just to reassure you, we don't add 106 monies into capital programmes or spending plans until we've received them. So we're clear that we've actually got the 106 before we build it into the long-term plans. And I think the report highlights an issue. There is a sort of a system issue with the planning system at the moment that needs to be resolved before we can more easily reconcile it. So I think to offer some reassurance and some assurance there, Councillor Keating, I think in that answer. But in terms of the assurance, we are looking to improve that where we can between the departments, but we are going to be reliant on some information coming out of the planning system to be able to do it more systematically than we do at the moment.
Yeah, just to be clear, that was when I looked into it, it was clearly, there was an issue with the planning department not passing this information on or not updating it. And of course, the finance department were just left with, as far as they were concerned, it was valid information. But and in one case, it was for a new house, which had, the planning application actually lapsed. And I walk past it every day, and the people had actually redone the lawn and turfed it. I said, well, there's no way they're going to be building a house on there. When I looked at it, it had actually lapsed by about the best part of a year anyway. I think they're only allowed to run for 3 years anyway. So it clearly wasn't going to happen. And when they checked on it, but the point was that this was sort of, they go on, once they go on the system, no one checks the validity, that it needs to be updated at some point. And, you know, and it is, you know, if we're not careful, we can dilute. But as Kevin rightly said, they aren't putting, they're not trying to spend the money, but the problem is it is there in a pool, and, you know, it does, councillors do believe the money may be available to spend. You know, at least 40 someone's got the sense to check these things, though.
Thank you. I'm reassured that they're on top of it. Councillor Parker.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry to say that I've got a lot of notes on this paper, and I would just like to suggest, as a past member for many years, like Councillor Keating, in previous times we've often done it page by page, so that any member wants to raise a point on one particular page. But I'd like first of all to go back to the comment made by Councillor Keating, and it is something that I do rather share. One very fundamental housekeeping, if I could be so bold as to suggest to officers, I think I have made this suggestion before, is that when you read this report, the issues particularly are whether it's fundamental or significant and so forth. Might I suggest that the paragraph on page 23, 4.5, audit recommendation categories, should actually be at point 3.2. In other words, at the very beginning of the report, so the report would read background 3.1, and then 3.2 prior to the table, yes, which shows fundamental, significant merits. We could be reminded at that point what is fundamental and what is significant. It seems to me to be in the wrong order. I don't know if you're following me. You've got a quizzical look on your face, Chair, but I have mentioned this before. It seems to me as though we're getting the informative after we've been asked to read one significant part of the paper.
I can assure you I'm following you.
Chair, do you want me to come back on that? Yeah.
Yes, please.
We'll make that change for the next report for you.
If you want me just to jump into, I think probably what I'll have to do maybe is just raise some of the more significant, oh no, I should say fundamentals. Okay, right. My colleague made the point about 3.8b, which I had noted as well. Could I ask on page 29, which starts paragraph 5.4, which is page 4 of 5 of that particular report, under procurement, is this item dealing with credit cards?
Yeah, this is the access that the Exchequer team have to our NatWest corporate card management account, where they manage all the accounts. Yes, I think they have like one password, and obviously the recommendation there is obviously they really should have individual passwords to such a system where such information can be edited. So yes, we are still waiting an update for completion of that one.
Having some years of experience of corporate spends on the credit card, I would actually disagree with them with the report. I would rather think this is a fundamental. When I read this, I was actually taken aback that this was not this was not a practice that had been in place for a number of years. We're talking about a block password, a generic password, and then if you go further on, it goes into the question of the retrieval of VAT due to what appears to be laxed work practice is all I can say, and this is potential loss of revenue to this council. So I'm very pleased to see that it's being attended to, but I rather think that should have fallen under a fundamental with a high priority. And big surprise, I have to say, as a member of this committee, when I think back of some of the other issues that we've given a lot of time and detailed consideration to, that there's this sort of casual approach that's been allowed to continue. I think, Chair, I'm making a comment. It's being dealt with. I'm pleased it is. I think the priority should have been higher. If I go then on to my next point, and I really am happy to give way to somebody else that may want to.
I've got a quick point.
Okay.
It's much further on. It's on page 50 of 235. And forgive me, but I'm not sure that I get confidence in the response from the procurement and contracts manager when this is a must and will continue to strive towards, but we have no date of when the change is going to be implemented. People are going to be trained, and it seems, you know, that's an area of expenditure that needs to be properly controlled. So that's my question.
Would an officer like to respond to? This is page 50 of 235, right at the bottom.
If I could just very quickly go back to the two recommendations from the Exchequer Services, I think Councillor Parker has mentioned, those last two you referred to have actually been completed now in the time between the report being produced and now. Exchequer Services manager has provided evidence that work's been done to complete that, so we're happy to sign those two off. It just leaves the one concerning the password. And with regards to comments from the contracts manager, I mean that's why this report we did give, I believe, just a reasonable assurance, just to highlight the issues that were involved, and also yes, with the contracts, the huge amount of money that is involved. And again, with regards to deadlines and when things will be completed, all I can say is that we do, as I said earlier, we do follow these up on a monthly basis. We are on the backs of the respective officers. If there is no response from them, we do escalate it up to their managers and ultimately head of service and Laura if need be. So that's kind of all I can offer in response to that particular comment.
Thank you. Councillor Frost.
Thank you very much, Chair. My question was very similar, and it's almost actually been answered by Mr. Bevan, but I'd just like to go back to Mr. Gundry. In your reply to Councillor Keating's question, quite a number of points back, you said that you didn't want to put a date on the report, okay, because that gave undue pressure, or potentially undue pressure, or allowed officers undue laxity. Certainly in my daytime job, what isn't measured doesn't get done. And I'd like you to please explain to me what pressure is being brought to bear on officers that are, in the case of 4.7 on page 26, a year overdue.
Thank you, Councillor. As Richard's just mentioned about our recommendation follow-up process, we believe it is very rigorous, of which coming to Audit Committee is one of the many steps that we have in place. And if, for example, the members of the committee see a report, see a recommendation that's still outstanding, the committee do have the right to call that officer to the committee to explain the reason why it's not in place. So that's a very high level response. But if you want to go into the steps, we'll do a monthly follow-up of the recommendations. If that recommendation is not completed within the relevant time, we will then speak to the relevant head of service. If the recommendation still remains outstanding, we'll go to the relevant corporate director and Section 151 officer if we believe it's a fundamental control issue, it still remains outstanding. And then we also come to Audit Committee. So they are the steps that we take. So there's a rigorous process we do put in place in terms of pressure. And we always use the phraseology, if you're not going to implement a recommendation, expect to be invited to Audit Committee.
Just as a follow-up, in the last 2 years, how many officers have been invited to a committee?
I believe we've had 2. Which was around the property system, which is a recommendation that remains outstanding because on the one side you can't implement a system within a month, which is the fundamental recommendation deadline, and the other one was the head of commissioning who attended committee to respond to the grants audit that was presented, which was quite a damning report.
I think the officer would like to come in.
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, that was really helpful what Paul set out there, and I thought it just might be helpful if I overlaid a senior management perspective, because these papers are reviewed by the heads of service, and certainly I see the ones for the officers that report into me, and I will chase my officers. I think the mood that I'm picking up, though, from members is that you're looking for a more active response. So, for instance, Yes, if you use my one, for instance, as I'm here, we all know why it wasn't done, because it was a bigger job than we thought it was. And the first part of the comment's okay. But the second part, which is all around then updating the website, I have just said works in progress. And I expect you want me to say works in progress, this will take 3 months. You know, at least then you would know what the timescale was I was working on for that. So certainly Kevin and I can take back to management team that as we always do, that we tell officers, whatever you write, we will print for Audit Committee. So write something sensible and useful. And so we will go back again.
Right, it's in progress.
Yes, so we will, yeah, so we will go.
Yes, there's one of mine, I know.
Yes, and there's one of mine, so we're all. So we will go back again and we'll reiterate with our heads of service. And Paul came to the next layer of management team meeting only last week and said, we have to be sharper on this. So we are trying, and we will quite clearly take back your request that you would prefer them not to be late at all, but if they are late and they're late with good reason, tell us why they're going to be late. So we'll get a more active comment for you in the future.
One other point is I well understand and respect what's being said by the manager, that it's followed up every month, and if it doesn't, if you don't get the reaction, you go to the head of service, etc., etc. That's all behind closed doors. It's not visible to us. We never get told. For example, we chased them. They were 6 months overdue. We chased them. We took it to head of service, and we had to take it to the governor, and now it's back with you. We never get that information because it's internal. Now, I don't actually want that information, because I don't want those issues to be hanging about that long. But it's not reassuring to be told that there's 4 steps before it gets to you, and sometimes we never even tell you there are 4 steps, or we've taken them. It's not reassuring.
I believe that the two officers have actually covered that, and I think they're fully aware, especially with you reiterated it again. Councillor Parker, did you have an item on this? Because I'm aware of the time and we must move on.
In danger of repetition, Chair, I've made some notes, and I feel I'd like to make comment because it's picking up on a point that was made by Richard, I think, and that was in relation to this amended target date. And I see this as a two-edged piece of work. It's a working aid memoir for audit to progress and chase actions, and it's intended to advise this committee as a snapshot. But I think it's my worry and my concern, and my views are well known, I hope, by this committee and fellow councillors in regard to fit for purpose reviews, reduction of staff levels, is that I'm worried that if we do not allow for an adjusted completion date on some of these items of work, then, and the word's been bandied about by other councillors, I wanted to actually say a very popular Queen song comes in mind, Pressure, and I think it's unfair to officers. I'll give you a quote, an example to support this point of view, is that on page 29, under 7.1 licensing, the target date original was the 31st of March of this year. And we can see very clearly from the licensing manager's comments that it's outside of their control. They've been waiting for government new regulations to be issued. So, you know, if department heads are looking at this, it's a constant suggestion that they're not performing. Well, nobody can do anything if they're awaiting the government. And there are several issues like that. So, yes, I do endorse my colleagues' desire for an agreed and revised completion dates on these issues. It's correct information for this committee, it's realistic information for this committee, and above all of that, I think it's fair to officers and takes away a question of potentially seeing to being underperforming when they work so hard on trying to resolve these issues. That's that point I want to comment on that issue. I have other points on the paper.
Would you like to try and get through the rest of the points pronto-ish, please?
Well, I would, Chair, but we, you know, this paper, this function is a very important function of this council's work. You know, it's our effectively our internal, if I dare use the word, policing, but it is a very important function. I wanted to ask then, and I will restrict this, and I maybe can even take up with the officer sometime in the future, page 28, which is to do with grants. And I think I probably would now be speaking in place of Councillor Harvey on this issue because it was dear to his heart. In fact, I'll go to page 27, first of all, 4.7. It talks about this recommendation cannot be marked as complete until the pages have done so, which is supposedly being reported to an Ofcom. Doesn't give a date. 4.9 is similar. And I would ask a question on 6.1. Is there not an officer's grant application tool that is set up here? Because it seems to me on some of the issues that are being raised, it talks about our current process does not. This is 6.1, page 28. The grant application process should include checks for potential duplication of funding. Again, Chair, I find it remarkable that that isn't a basic step that should have been taken. And for the comment to be, our current process does not require it, And then the recommendation is the latest update is dated on the 16th of June this year. The recommendation cannot be marked as complete until it can be evidenced that this is the case in the next application and approving process. Well, I would like to think that one of the worries Councillor Harvey had, and I think there were other members, previous meetings, over the issue of grants of funding to organisations, was a transparent system. I would have thought there must be surely now in place, or work being done, to have some sort of toolbox where officers can check that they've addressed all of these issues. That would safeguard a robust, transparent and fair system.
I'll ask the officer to make a comment on that.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Parker, you're quite right. As both Paul and Richard have said, Lisa Kirkman, our Head of Commissioning, came to Audit, and she came to Audit voluntarily when you first received this report in order to explain her position. And I think it is a simple case of evidencing, because officers are preparing a new grants programme, and the grants programme and process happens once a year. So no other grants are being approved at this moment in time until we have the new process. So what Lisa's trying to explain there is that, of course, that will be in the system, but our audit team won't accept it as complete until they have the new system in front of them, and we can point to the part that says check for duplication of funding. So it's merely work in progress for this, because I can assure you that I have made sure, working with Lisa Kirkman, that these points will be addressed in our new system. So this is a matter of timing, this one. So all of these points will be dealt with before the new grant system comes into play for next financial year.
Thank you, Chair. And I totally accept Laura's explanation, which I understand. The fundamental point being, let's have in progress rather than leaving it as a 31st of January 14 target date, because it is still in progress. Or, you know, my worry is anybody that picks up the document, doesn't refer to it in detail, doesn't understand the background. It's a document that's there. It's recorded, and I think we've got to try. I would always want to think that we are operating a hard factual assessment of what's happening within the business of this council, but I also have an eye to the fairness of the treatment of officers and how it reflects on their carrying out their responsibilities. I'll finish on that point in that particular part of the paper. Thank you, Chair.
In which case you move on. Would you like to speak?
Thank you, Chair. If the committee would like us to add a column of revised target date where we feel it's appropriate, we'll gladly do so.
I believe that's the committee's wish. Yes, it is the committee's wish. If we now move on to the latter part of paper C, because we have been going backwards and forwards a bit on this. We've got Appendix 2, Appendix 3 that we've already commented, Appendix 4, right through to Appendix 10, I believe. 11. No comments on that, in which case you move to paper D. Councillor Keating.
Sorry, Chair, I do have a comment, and it's on page 31 of 235, Local Tax Summary and Audit Report. First of all, it's difficult to read if you superimpose final on top of a printed word. However, the third bullet point from the bottom says the current level of detail recorded in the local tax system for write-offs and special arrangements is inconsistent. But that's not, as I can understand it, picked up in the detail of pages 3 and 4. So it would be helpful to know how we're going to deal with that. Thank you.
Jim, would you like to comment? That was one of the things I think I spoke to you about.
I think it's picked up in some of the comments that are in the significant part of the audit in terms of special arrangements and their use. I think. Or it may have been I can't remember. I have to look at my audit records. Whether that's a merits attention, whether that was a merits attention item.
Sorry, Chair, would it be possible for us to come back with a response to that one for you?
Yeah. Right, we are just about to go on to paper D. What are you happy? Oh, Kevin, you'd like to speak?
Well, I thought I didn't turn the page. I think 7.9 on page 34. That's one of that's one that does reference that, which was talking about the write-offs in the system and the use of the text and the diary function. And that's the element that I think, subject to my audit colleagues telling me I've got that wrong, that's one of the elements that was being referred to in terms of consistency of documentation. So that's where the text field is used in the system, in the diary entry, that it should be, as far as possible, standardized more. And you can see the action that's been agreed is that we will do that where we can, and that where necessary we'll get a software enhancement. So that's where it's referenced in the audit report, and that's the action that we're taking on it. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Parker.
Just wanted to say for ease of reading again, it's some of these things where I would like just to be so bold as to offer a suggestion. Under the appendixes that are 2, 3, up to 5, at the bottom of at the end of the paragraphs, you have this highlighted. If we take the page that we've just been dealing with, page 34, 4 merits attention recommendations also arose during this audit. Might I just suggest perhaps that would be worthwhile incorporating in the audit opinion part of the report rather than just at the end of those, because it's significant to bring that to our attention, I think, early on, rather than just at the end of those paragraphs. It's a bit, from my view, I think it would be demonstrate more clearly the position on that particular audit.
Thank you, Chair. We'll do that.
Please do bear in mind we've got 235 pages. You can always ask for more information, but if you have more information, please make use of it and read it. I know you do actually, Councillor, but not all councillors do.
Sorry, thank you, Chair. This is open to all members of the committee. I know there's a few have been on the committee for a few years and greatly assisted and helped us through this process. But any new members, if they wish to meet with myself or my team, just understand the audit process we go through and how we record things, then by all means do get in touch with me and we can arrange something for you.
Thank you. Paper D, back to you if you would like to introduce it.
Thank you, Chair. This is an annual report I do for committee where I give the members of the committee my opinion of the overall control environment of the council, and paper D does this for you. And if you turn to page 78 of 235, paragraph 6.5, you will see that's my opinion of the control environment for the last financial year, where I give a substantial assurance. In terms of coming up with that opinion, I do take into account all the work that internal audit have done through the year. And Appendix 1, which is page 80 of 235, is a summary of all the audit assignments carried out through the year, alongside the assurance for each of those audits. I've taken on board a comment that Councillor Parker made this time last year and added in the previous year's assurances for you for a comparison purpose. And as you can see, we have given more full assurances than we did the previous year, so it is an improving picture that we have. The other piece of work that I do with this report is to review the performance of internal audits, and Appendix 2, which is page 82, is a high-level summary of a compliance checklist that I've carried out and consulted with Kevin based on the public sector internal audit standard. This is a new standard for the 2013-14 year. As there's 334 questions in that standard, I didn't wish to give you the whole checklist, but if anybody would like it, please get in touch with me. I can email it to you. In terms of that assessment, there are 11 areas where we are not compliant, and there are 4 areas where we are partially compliant. If you turn to page 79 of 235, I've summarised those areas where we need to, there's room for improvement. The first one is carrying out an external assessment against the public sector internal audit standard checklist. This is a requirement that has to be carried out within every 5 years. As we're only 1 year in, it's something myself and Kevin will be discussing to put in place. Maybe 3 years' time we'll get an external assessment, and that assessment will come to yourself. And the other area is a documented quality assurance and improvement plan. This is something which again will be reported to committee this time next year when I do my annual report, which will highlight those areas where we do need to improve. So, for example, we have this checklist, and on Appendix 3, which is page 83 of 235, there's an action plan of all the non-compliance and partial compliance areas that we need to implement. So that is part way towards having our quality assurance and improvement plan. Other than that, I'll pass over for questions. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Pearce.
Thank you. Take a deep breath on this one, I think. It's my understanding that the internal audit manager reports directly to the head of resources. Is that correct?
Yes, on report, I do have a reporting line to the head of resources, but I also have a reporting line into the chief executive, and I also have the ability to meet with audit committee as if I have any issues that I feel need to be raised in private to the committee, and vice versa. If the committee wish to raise anything to me, they can do that as well.
Well, thank you for that. Has that ever happened?
No.
Chair, my worry is simply that internal audit shouldn't be part of the system, and I'm just making the point that if it's never happened, you have to wonder whether it might have happened, and would it not be better for the head of internal audit to report directly to the chief executive?
I don't know the answer to that, but I do know that we've been audited externally, PricewaterhouseCoopers, and we appear, from what I've read, to come up very well in that. So the current system we have is not letting us down. In fact, perhaps you could clarify where we are. We're way above average, put it that way. Could you?
Well, Chair, I was just going to add, it's a management responsibility, as Paul said. There's a direct line through to the CX anyway. There's also a protocol for the head of internal audit as part of the council's constitution that sets out those rights and reporting rights in effect. So I think we've got all those elements covered off, and in my role as Section 151 officer, I'm also responsible for the internal control environment, and I need assurance on that, which is where the reporting line into me comes from.
Can I just say, Chair, N1 was also audited externally.
I think that's a good point. Thank you. Councillor Parker.
Thank you, Chair. My only excuse now is that it was getting very late last night. In fact, I started to get to the early hours of this morning when I was getting to this paper. And I'm going to probably ask the idiot question of the day. But on page 84, we start with a lot of... we had a very brief glossary which confirmed the PSIAS, and it was easy to decipher QAIP, but I couldn't break the code on CAE.
Sorry, yeah, that's the Chief Audit Executive. It's the terminology used in the standard, which effectively means Internal Audit Manager. Sorry.
Just a suggestion that the glossary needs to be expanded a bit next time.
Well, CAE, we can put Paul Gundry. Thank you, councillors. You now move on to paper E, the different officer to talk to us this time. This is the corporate local code of corporate governance. Basically, it's to read and approve. So I'll ask the officer to introduce it.
Thank you, Chairman. Members, I present this as a member of the Council Stewardship Team, and as you'll see from a later paper, both Paul Gundry and Kevin Jaquest are also on that team, so we're all available to answer questions if there are any. For the benefit of new members, the Council is obliged to have a local code of corporate governance, and our code broadly follows the national model. And I say broadly because members who have previously sat on this committee or its predecessor have taken the opportunity to update and amend and finesse the local code in particular places to make it Basingstoke appropriate. This code sets out the way we manage our business, and it not only sets out the way our systems work as officers and members, but also sets out our expected behaviours and ways of working. And you can see on the report on page 93, there are 6 principles set out. And then as the code develops on, you can see that there are supporting principles under those main principles, and then specific requirements which we need to meet in order to meet each principle. And that's what members in the past have focused on. The reason this code is important is that it forms the basis of the annual governance audit, which is an undertaken, I can assure you, completely independently and very challengingly for the rest of us that sit on stewardship team, which is based on this local code. So essentially, if it's in this code, the council should be able to deliver its aspirations. And so members, this year, other than a minor change that I need to make to reflect the change in the name of this committee, because when this was written, we were pre the new constitution, what we have here is a local code that is the same as last year's code, so no changes have been made. It is before you for adoption today for 2014-15, so this financial year.
So apart from governance being removed from the title, even though we're still doing it, and the year being 14-15 instead of 13-14, anybody else want to comment on anything else? In which case, could we please, if you look at page 88 of 235, 2.1, the local code, corporate governance, we need to approve it. Can we please have a nod of approval from everybody? It would really help. Thank you very much. That's all round. Thank you. I'm looking at the officer to see if we need a proposal and a secondary recorded. Thank you, Councillor Keating. Councillor Frost has seconded. All those in favour? Unanimous. Thank you. If it was needed, it's now done. That is paper E completed. Paper F, which is annual government governance statement for the 13-14 year. Sorry? Okay, right. And again, it's note it and approve it. I'll ask the officer to introduce it.
Thank you, Chairman. The reason that these items are here, even though they include governance, is that they are so closely related to the audit function. This is the most appropriate committee for these papers to come to. So this paper flows logically from the last paper. Again, members who've been here before know that in previous years we put the two papers together and we've all got confused about what year we're looking at. So this paper is the annual governance statement based on last year's code of conduct that was in place up until March 2014. So you adopt a local code and then Paul and the team do an audit to say how well have we achieved what we said we would in that code. So this report here is in draft for your approval, and then you'll see it again in September because it forms part of the annual statement of accounts. The report sets out areas we do well and areas for attention, and you can see, members, that they're set out on page 125, and they are essentially fundamental recommendations from audit reports undertaken in the last year that, in the view of stewardship group, have a governance angle to them. Members who have previously sat here are nodding, knowing that we've been around this this level of clarification before, but we're absolutely happy to explain it again so everyone is clear. So this is a draft report for you to agree today, which will come back again in September with an update and forms part of the statement of accounts. Oh, sorry.
Councillor Keating. So could you just see who else wishes to speak?
Thank you, Chair. Not only have we seen this type of paper before, we've discussed this issue before. The issue I refer to is identified on page 120 and is 6C. This is whereby we say that the council does not fully comply with the CIPFA rules. Now, the CIPFA rules are the national standard rules in our labour person terms. They're the national agreed standard rules, and we don't comply with them in this particular respect. Now, we have made a number of arrangements to satisfy some people that we're sufficiently okay with what we're doing. Basically, the standard CIPFA rules effectively says the chief financial officer or the head of resources, whichever you call it, right, should be a member of the senior leadership team. Now, the senior leadership team in this case is the chief executive and his two directors. In every other councils, according to the CIPFA rules, the head of resources is a member of that leadership team. We don't do that, and I don't understand why. And I have queried this before, and I will continue to query it, because I don't understand why. Now, I do know that the senior leadership team, which currently excludes the head of resources, currently Kevin Jaquest, who sits at the top of the table, is allowed to attend. Isn't that great, eh? He's allowed to attend. And because he's allowed to attend, he can see the agenda. But in my mind, being allowed to attend and seeing the agenda does not equate to being a member of the team and having the responsibility of membership of the team. So I believe we should reconsider whether or not the full CIPFA rule should be applied in this case. Thank you, Chair.
Could I ask the officer to reply because I believe we've had this discussion a couple, 3 days ago.
It's somewhat awkward for me to reply in that it directly relates to me, my role personally.
But to
I can say,
clarify,
I can clarify a couple of points, Chairman. Just without going into that specifics necessarily, other than to say a couple of things that have altered since first raised by the committee is one is there is a formalised protocol now included in the Constitution. So again, these rights and the rights of information access and attendance and those things are now, and also the reciprocal rights of members and senior officers to involve me and to make me aware of issues at both sides. Those are in the protocol. So there's a protocol in place now. And the other point I was going to raise is it has been, I think it was raised recently with external auditors, and external auditors will say that councils do this differently. We're not the only council in this position. So the role of 151 officer does appear in different tiers across local government. That's really all I can probably say at this stage in terms of where we are in this council.
If I clarify, this was discussed a few days ago. I believe I discussed it with you, Kevin, was it? I discussed it with somebody on a pre-meeting.
Sorry, Chair, I think it came up at the briefing with the training session with the external auditors.
Full council chamber it came up in, yes, with the external auditors. That's right, yes, it did. And it was discussed then.
If I may, Chair. To have a formalised note of saying we're not going to comply with the rules doesn't actually reassure me in any shape or form. Could somebody, and I mean other than the head of resources, because we're talking about the role or the job, not the person, but it would certainly be helpful if it was somebody other than Kevin, explain why we don't comply, such that I could understand.
If I can assist on that, I think the committee asked this a while back, perhaps a year ago, and the chief executive came to the committee and gave his rationale for the position in this council, and I think he circulated a note to all members as well. So that note is out there. Presumably we can recirculate it if necessary.
Clarify, but roughly 2 years ago there was a note from the chief executive. Councillor Parker.
If we can comment on this particular very important point that's been raised by Councillor Keating yet again, and I totally endorse what he said and agree with his views. It just seems to be mystifying why we would choose not to give our head of finances membership of that decision team. To say that he can invite himself, which is actually the wording here, it doesn't, he's not got an open invitation, but he can send an invitation and say, I'd like to go to this meeting, and then go, this belongs way back, not in the current trend for open and transparent management of this council's affairs. It doesn't really matter what justification is given as to why we choose to do it differently. Maybe we should look at whether we do choose to do it differently, and who does have that final sanction? Is there another committee that this committee could refer this issue to? Maybe standards, I don't know, but it's mystifying why we would choose not to comply. Everything we've heard in all of the reports that we've looked at up until now, the training that we received before, compliance and the need to comply is stressed. Yet here, for reasons that probably I was present at the committee that the chief executive attended and gave his answer, but I don't know that I was particularly satisfied with it then, but it basically was telling us this is how we are going to do it. And if there's any way this committee can force further consideration by some other higher body, then we should do that.
Yes, please.
Members, I'm not sure if you're minded that you'd like the Chief Executive to return, or whether I will do as one of the members of the management team. I'll keep going. Members, you have raised this point before, and indeed, Kevin, with great dignity there, set out his position, and it's clearly not a question for Kevin. But what I would say to you is that over the past year or so, that we have made a change in how our management systems operate, and it is very true that in the past, the decision-making body from the officer side of the council was SLT, Chief Executive and 2 directors. But in the past couple of years, as we've moved through a period of change and we've needed to ensure that our senior team, which includes Kevin and the other heads of service, are more empowered to make decisions, the emphasis of that decision-making body has moved to a group which you would know as SMG, Senior Management Group. And Kevin, as Head of Resources, and indeed our Head of Legal and Head of HR, are all present on that group. And as Kevin has outlined, in some councils, it is that group that makes a decision, and in other councils, it would be Director and Chief Executive, along with Head of HR, Head of Legal, Head of Finance, who would form the senior decision-making team. In our council, it is that wider team that includes Heads of Service, Chief Executive and Director. And in that way, Kevin and I have this debate fairly regularly. We are compliant. He is part of the decision-making team that makes the most senior decisions for this council. Because SLT now meets and it horizon scans. It does not make significant decisions, and if it did, I can assure you that Kevin would be in the room. And I've asked Kevin to attend meetings, and Kevin has also invited himself to meetings, and he has never, ever declined to attend, because certainly, as behalf of the SLT, we recognise the value that either he or our Head of Legal or Head of HR would bring to it. But the decision-making body for this organisation for corporate matters and strategic matters is now much more Senior Management Group, which incorporates the 3 SLT and all our heads of service and the policy managers, much more than SLT. But in terms of that sit for statement, we are not fully compliant. But as a member of your management team, I would say to you, I'm confident that we are not exposed to any risk or we're any breach, and the external auditors would say that, from that arrangement.
Councillor Parker.
I'm very appreciative of Laura's explanation. What I would ask is, let's have that in a report.
Certainly, Chairman. I'm sure the Chief Executive or myself can set that out as we have done previously. Not a problem at all.
Thank you. Are there any other comments? We're on paper F. Councillor Pearce.
Thank you, Chair. Page 126, 235, number 2, the current position. The next step is to form a members' advisory panel to work on the review and agree the process before presenting a final proposal to Cabinet. When is that happening?
Through you, Chairman, clearly as members know, to call a members' advisory panel is within the gift of the portfolio holder. I actually don't have an update on whether he is still minded to do that for you today.
Understand then, if this is an annual governance statement, how it's in the gift of a Cabinet member to decide to do it or not, when the statement says clearly the next step is to form a members' advisory panel.
Through you, Chairman, it's a timing matter again. This report picks up the audit statement that was in place as of 31st of March. So this was the position at an audit which would have been received at that date. It's now obviously just into July. Clearly a map hasn't been called. It's just July, isn't it? Oh no, it's July tomorrow. It's July tomorrow. Clearly the portfolio holder hasn't chosen to call a map yet. There isn't an update on that statement from the officer at this point.
I understand the clarification, but my point is very, very basic. This is a governance statement. It says in it something has to happen. It is not in the gift of a cabinet member to say whether it should or not. It should have already happened. We see the target date of the 30th of November. The cabinet member is not in a position to say, I'm going to ignore that piece in the governance statement.
Helps. I will make sure that the cabinet member is aware of what's been said tonight, this afternoon, sorry, here, and I'll chase him up. But I cannot give a guarantee what somebody else will say. I can guarantee I will speak to him. Councillor Parker.
Chair, it's in your brief to decide whether that's something that is noted in the minutes, and I think it's perhaps something that you might care to make a note of in the minutes.
Since it's an issue that takes time, yes, it is in the minutes, yes. To Parker.
Yes, on the paper, if I may just refer to page 122 of 235, paragraph 9. Again, I'd like just to suggest for clarity of the content. We seem to have wrapped up in paragraph A reference to the whistleblowing policy and the complaints policy, when paragraph B is also dealing with complaints. I rather feel that whistleblowing policy is a separate issue. Complaints by members of the public should be taken out of paragraph A. It's nothing related to whistleblowing, it's complaints. And I would like to also suggest that I know it's a favoured trend to always continue to refer to access of information on the council's website, but in the situation I think we should also have a mind to people who are not regular users or have regular access. I would assume there is probably a booklet that gives the rights of the members of the public, and I think attention should be drawn to that and how to access it.
Most helpful, thank you, Councillor Parker. Yes, I can split the paragraph as you indicate there and make the reference to the leaflet, so thank you for that, of course.
Councillor Parker.
Revert back to the previous item where I asked for a report. I mean, if it's easier, all I'm trying to do is we have a discussion, we raise a point. If maybe members would prefer a written response in that sense, rather than the full suggestion of a report, I would bow to that.
Well, a written email will come round to the members of this committee regarding it. As to the length of it, I don't know yet. That's regarding section 15, whatever, sorry.
And perhaps, Chairman, if I might just interrupt there, perhaps with Kevin's agreement, because clearly it is his post, and I will expand, if you like, a little bit more in that paragraph C, 6C, to set out a little bit more. I'll send a written response by all means, but expand a little bit more what I said in paragraph C to set out the arrangements, because it does look very stark in there, and there's a little more context behind that.
Councillor Parker.
I think that's an excellent suggestion.
Thank you. If that is all on paper F, right at the beginning, we are asked to note and approve it. Are we in general agreement to approve? Thank you. Approved. Paper G. I have been reminded by my gentleman on the left that we don't actually need propose and second. General approval is acceptable.
Committee just need to approve the recommendation. That's fine. We're working in committee rather than full council rules. Clearly, you're approving subject to amendments being made as detailed by, which will be detailed by Stephen in the minutes.
Sorry, Councillor Parker.
Well, normal thing would be to then just have someone read back what changes are being made. Then we agree that.
Right. So let's just go back to paper F. The agreements we made to change were an enlargement from one of the senior leadership team people regarding 6.C, and 9A and B being clarified from internal and external to the council. And yeah, reference to a booklet for those not so familiar with for anybody actually, yes.
And 6.2, the point I raised.
6.2, just remind me.
Well, the fact that somehow we've given the cabinet, or the cabinet member seems to have a choice in a matter
That's the one I've agreed to do. Thank
Yeah.
you, yes. Okay, I must forget. Thank you.
Just raise it at the full council meeting if you want.
I will raise it actually within an hour or half an hour of leaving this meeting, actually, as it's done then.
Forgive me, Chairman, may I, just for clarity, I can amend the report with respect to 6C and 9A. However, the point around the comment to the portfolio holder is a comment from the committee, which will be captured in the minutes that Councillor Marks has offered to take back. So I can't amend the report there because I've dragged that out of a audit report.
Thank you. Paper G, Treasury Management. And it is recommended that we note this is a routine paper. Dean here, and I'll ask you to introduce it, please.
Thank you, Chair. As it says, this is the report on the Treasury Management function. The Treasury Management function generated £3.1 million of interest income for the year, with an average return of just over 2%. That was a £308,000 shortfall against what we budgeted. So it's 3.1 million versus a 3.4 million pound budget. It's not unexpected, and it's been reported throughout the year. It's entirely due to the low prevailing interest rates and our decision not to reinvest in the long term, pending the outcome of the strategic review. The shortfall will be met from the interest risk reserve, which was a reserve that's specifically set up to deal with in-year variances. Despite the shortfall, our performance is one of the best in the country, at more than double the average of most local authorities, with one of the lowest risk scores at the same time. So if you've got any questions, I'll be doing my best to answer them. Thank you.
Are there any questions or Councillor Pearce, then Councillor Keating?
Just a question on page 130, where you talk about overall position of the investment portfolio. Overall return for the year was 2.28%. Do you have a view on what the overall return will be for the current financial year?
We budgeted for a return of 2.3%, but that's on the basis that the changes to the strategy, which involve using fund managers, probably won't happen until the mid-year. We're still in the process of selecting fund managers. So the budget, I believe, is for £3.5 million return, which is a part year effect of the new strategy. Currently it's 3.4 million, the budget, but we're only actually achieving 3.1, so it's a 0.4 million pound uplift from where we are at the moment. The full year effect of the new strategy is to try and take that return to 3.8 million, which is nearer 3.4%, I think. So we're looking at an increase once we've got the new strategy in place.
Sorry, Councillor Keating?
Thank you, Chair. I was talking to someone recently about the investment strategy of the Hampshire Local Government Pension Fund. Not a small fund. It's in the order of billions, not millions. They have a strategy of investing in retail distribution centres, not retail shops or, or supermarkets, the distribution centres which they use. And I'm told they get a return on their investments in the order of 17%. Now, I cannot verify that at this moment, but it would seem to be a strategic mile away from where we are in terms of investment returns. And I just wondered if somebody might have a look at that as an issue versus our investment strategy. Thank you.
The short answer to that is Hampshire County Council Pension Fund operate under completely different rules, if you like, in terms of what they can and can't do with their investments. We can invest in retail distribution centres, but we'd have to do it by physically buying them or building them and using some of our cash resources to do that. The rules that we operate under wouldn't allow us to just go and buy. We might be able to do it via a fund. If there was a fund out there that was investing in those types of properties, we might be able to do it through an investment property fund, but we wouldn't be able to just go out and do it directly ourselves in the same way that the county pension fund might be able to.
I was just going to add one other thing, which is the council recently approved the property and alternate investment strategy, which would give scope potentially, if it was also for economic regeneration purposes as well, or economic purposes, or for the council to look at those types of things. So the strategy, that was a deliberate part of the review, where some of the funding that's currently in cash and treasury management investment is being earmarked for potential appropriate investment in non-cash based things outside of the treasury management rules in effect. And so that policy is in place by council, and who knows what may or may not come forward from that. But that would, I would see potentially that would be, if there was an appropriate investment route, it would be through the alternate investment strategy, not through the treasury one.
Could I ask Chair that the issue be referred to them?
Yes, they'll look at it. Bear in mind, we used to be very strict on what they could invest. What's gone through council recently has relaxed it a little bit, but they still haven't got flexibility to do as they like. Councillor Tilbury.
Yeah, just to say, I seem to recall Hampshire County Council used to invest in Bernie Madoff's Ponzi scheme, so I think I wouldn't follow anything they do too closely, Sean. They lost £5 million, but I'm glad I'm not one of their pensioners. What I was going to ask is, obviously local authority deposits, they're usually quite a good source and quite a good rate of interest on those. I mean, I see Islington's dropped off there a few years ago. Now, we were getting 11% from them at one time. We get from, historic ones there, but even the current ones there are still quite good. Is that a sort of, I mean, I know usually whenever I say this, I get shouted down byOnnelly or John Leake, but neither of them are on the committee anymore. But is that something, is there much of an appetite for that sort of lending now? It's
With local authorities, because the government's been downgraded to AA, local authorities are much closer with government in terms of the sort of credit ratings. So they sort of feel that they don't have to offer such good returns, so they can be similar to the government type returns that you might get from gilts and so on. So they're less attractive in that sense. They do give you an uplift on what you'd get on a gilt, and we do have some scope within the current strategy for a little bit more investment with other local authorities. But with all the news about potentially local authorities going bust and so on, which personally I don't actually believe, but but we can't just go out and invest a whole scale amounts in local authorities. But having said that, other authorities are doing it. In the report, there's a benchmarking. We're one of the best performing. We're not the best performing. The best performing has actually gone out and done very long investment with other local authorities, up to sort of 20 years. So they obviously have a different view in terms of the risks of investing in local authorities.
Councillor Keating?
Why would we take our money and give it to other local authorities to do what they want when we can't do what we want here? Hey? Hey, why can't we just build houses instead of them?
Could you explain why we've got one of the lowest council taxes, please?
Well, all I would say in answer to that, we're operating the treasury management strategy in line with the council's approved policy. So council have approved the parameters for the treasury management investment strategy. In terms of, again, I'll go back to the previous answer. In terms of alternatives to treasury management, then the council again has approved the property and alternate investment strategy, which has a strand of potentially commercial, housing and renewable within it. So that is the area that you're more likely to see movement than the pure treasury management strategy.
Councillor Parker?
My response to Councillor Keating would perhaps be that it might be more acceptable than investing in corporate debt. And maybe economies outside of this country, which the new investment strategy will perhaps now allow us to. At least we will be investing in other authorities within the UK. But it should perhaps be a secondary form of investment. I wanted just to ask officers, is there not now a local authority self-help fund, which is almost like a local authority fund of funds, which gives this wider spread and a bit more security against this potential? I thought I'd read something about this, and the returns were being projected as being quite reasonable.
There's not a local authority, there is a money market fund that is linked more to public sector, the ISC, can't remember the name of it, but there's certainly a money market fund, but it's quite small in terms of its overall size, so we would have a large proportion of that, so we don't use that money market fund. We use a range of money market funds, we don't use that one at the moment. So that's the money market fund side. And I'm not sure whether you were referring to the potential for the local authorities to club together to issue bonds, which is the Municipal Bond Agency, which is something that's being looked at by the LGA at the moment. And down the line, potentially would offer a route for local authorities to raise finance, instead of using PWLB or banks, and to issue bonds out into the market. But that's going through its business case of fundraising at the moment.
It sounds as though you're keeping your eye on that, and you'll continue to do so.
Yeah, actually, I'm on the project board for the LGA on the Municipal Bond Agency. So yes.
Right, we're looking at paper G. Are there any further comments? Because it's just to note, and on the piece of paper that came around right at the beginning, we are intending to have a presentation on this later on. Which
yes, we would look if members were happy with that to run a session. We've used our Treasury Management advisors to run the session, and I think members who attended it before found it useful. So we'd look to run that again. We will circulate dates later, but it's a sort of a couple of hour session. Takes you through the various elements and the statutory backing as well.
right. If I take it, paper G is noted. Yes. Thank you. Paper H. Oh, this is a big one. Right.
Thank you, Chair. This is paper H. This report presents the draft unaudited statement of accounts for 2013-14 for information purposes. We're not looking for approval of these accounts. We'll be coming back to the committee in September once the audit's been completed with an audited version of the accounts. It's good practice for us to give members an early sighting of the accounts that they're going to be asked to approve in September, and that's the main purpose of this report. It's a very long report. It's 75 pages. I wasn't anticipating a detailed review of it at this meeting. However, I would ask you to take it away with you, read it. And at any time between now and September, if you've got any questions or queries or things that you don't quite understand in it, I'm happy to meet with members outside of these meetings to improve your sort of knowledge and understanding. So, if you, I'm happy to take some questions if there are specific questions on the report. But as I said, I didn't want to go into too much detail in terms of questions. Thank you.
Councillor Pearce.
I'm asking this question because you raised it in our session beforehand, and it's on section 8.4 on page 155. It's not a big deal, but 12.2 million is quite a lot of money, and it refers to your slide presentation, slides 23 and 24, about significant re-evaluations. And I'd just like to hear a little bit more about, particularly that some of the property, the one that surprised me the most, I suppose, was the Haymarket Theatre. I thought it was worth much more than that, of course, but having dropped from 6.3 to 2.5 or thereabouts. And just a view on that, really. I mean, how could you be so far, not you personally, but how could one be so far out on our property valuations of what is a listed building? Yeah, and could be used during the day. No, I don't want to hear the answer.
Valuing something like a theatre, I mean, it is a specialist valuation. And according to our accounts, we have to do it using a depreciated replacement cost. So the fact that it's a listed building makes no difference. So it makes a difference. Yes, it does, and that may well be why the external valuation that was done, they would have built in a much higher allowance for dilapidation, or whatever you want to call it, in terms of depreciation, in terms of how much it would have cost or would cost to replace, because they would be looking at what it would cost to replace a similar delivering a similar level of service. So obviously the anvil is a new state of the art. It's going to cost a lot of money to replace something like that, whereas the Haymarket Theatre is a bit old and a bit antiquated, as it were. So to replace something of similar quality in terms of service potential would be a lot less. It may well be that the valuation that we've had in the past, which was done in-house, our in-house valuation team are not experts in valuing those types of properties. They tend to focus on the investment properties and valuing property based on rental streams and lettings. We have had changes of personnel in the property team over the last year or so, and they decided it was probably best for us to go outside with those valuations and get the external experts in to value those. And as with any valuations, if you have, you could ask three values, you'll get three different values. So it's a combination of reason as to why it's such a big swing.
Chair, I think I'd take the point. I'd be surprised if you could rebuild that for just over 2 million. But you're quite right, valuers, accountants take three of them, three different. Of course, with actuaries, it would be 4.
Could you explain if it makes any difference to us if it's valued at 2 or 10 million? What's the relevance?
In terms of the relevance to the accounts, it's the number that appears in the balance sheet, but it doesn't actually make a difference in terms of what it's valued at. What it does do is it changes the amount of depreciation that we charge to the service, because that's based around the value and the remaining useful life. But depreciation for local authorities is not a real cost anyway, so it's not included. It may be included in performance indicators if you were looking at the cost of theatres, so we say, across a number of local authorities. It might make a difference in terms of where the council sort of costs sit relative to other authorities. But in terms of the impact for the council taxpayer, it makes no difference.
If we look at page 164, at the bottom there, we've got the income. There was a question earlier about interest, where our income comes from. There's a pie chart there that clearly shows interest income is 3.5. It's quite sensitive to 0.1% changes. And the council tax is only 7.5 million out of 128 million. Point is, if we could loan some money out to another council, well, anything above 3 at the moment would be great, but we don't know how long term. We could increase this other income, so we actually basically get free money.
If I say so, if we built houses, we could get 5 or 6, 7%.
Are we allowed to build houses then?
I was just going to refer you back to the previous discussion and say that we've got alternative investment strategy. I think that's probably that's where the council have determined that some more resource should go and set a framework on board for that. So I think we need to wait and see how things progress through that, not as a treasury management activity. And this is reporting on the treasury management activity.
Right, this is for noting. These are draft, and we will get hopefully very similar for final ones later on. Right, paper I will vacate the chair. My vice chairman will take this paper, and I will, after this paper, I will shut the meeting down because I've got one more item. I'll let the vice do it.
So can we have the officer responsible to open it up? Thank you.
Thank you. This is an annual report to the committee. This is the annual report to the committee. What it attempts to do is bring together all things many down into one report, one financial statement, as requested by the committee. I think it's the second time we've done that. So it covers, as you can see from the report, all elements. It covers the joint many down committee accounts, income and expenditure, what the council spent promoting many down, what HCC have spent in the last year, what the historic spend has been, what the valuation is for the accounts, or what it will be for the last year's accounts, and how that's changed, and a little bit of rationale for that, where we are in terms of HCC's option to purchase and how much they paid off of that option, and a little bit in the appendix on the agreement, the lease agreement. So again, this is something that this committee requested. It brings together all those elements. They're reported, most of those are reporting in different places in the council's accounts. And I would just draw the committee's attention to 2.2, which is to say that in future it's intending that this report will go to the new Melly Down Overview Committee in future rather than to this committee. And the report asks members to note it. Thank you.
Councillor Keating.
Thank you, Chair. As people who've been around this table before will know, this is one of the small successes that I've had in my whole life. Right? 5 years we've got to get to here, get all the Melly Down bits put together. And I'm very pleased that we've done it and that it works. I'm unsure that having achieved what we wanted to achieve, which is get the full picture together, that we should then say, let someone else now look at it. First and foremost, overview committees of this council do not have any delegated authority. None. They don't have any delegated authority. They don't have any authority to actually make decisions. None. The only thing they can do, and I've been on the Constitutional Working Party, the only thing that an overview committee can do is to pass comments to the cabinet member. That's the only thing it can do. I have no difficulty in understanding or accepting that the relevant overview committee should see these papers. I have no difficulty about that. And they might actually bring to any examination of such a report that they see an element of additional awareness of some issues about Melly Down. I do believe that the accounts, the financial statements, should not be excluded from audit. I think to say that we'll have audit of all of the accounting systems, etc., but by the way, there's this other bit that you won't even have a look at. That seems odd to me. I would go so far as to say it was wrong. So my suggestion to this committee would be that the Melly Down Overview Committee should of course see these papers, and they'd be entitled to, but that the ownership of the financial reports of this nature should stay with audit. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, we've brought it here for members' views. If members wish that to be the case, and there's absolutely no problem with it continuing to come to this committee annually and to go to the same report to go to the Ofcom committee. The point of the report was to highlight that there is this Ofcom and they ought to get some information, but there's no problem if members are happy with that it comes to both committees.
.3, can I just confirm this? In this case, the valuation has gone up by quite a large amount, so almost a third. Firstly, who did that valuation? Secondly, is this a valuation based on the land's value as agricultural land as we sit now, or is it based on? I can't believe that it's only 9. I know the size of the Melly Down estate, so I mean I must be right in assuming this is agricultural land value. That's my first question. I have another one.
Thank you, Chair. It was valued again externally by Deloitte LLP. So external valuers. It's valued for the accounts purposes, for inclusion in the statement of accounts. It's not valued on the basis of for a sale price, for example, but it's based using the valuation RICS Red Book basis, and they use a couple of approaches to arrive at their value, but it is the value for the whole of the site based on assumptions about future development and the risk or otherwise to that future development. So they take a view, they've taken a view of the element of the land that is farmed at the moment and the element of land that will remain after any development. And they've also assumed development over in a number of years' times, parcelled out and then all discounted back to the current position. So that's the value that, from an accounting point of view, they're putting on that land ownership at the current point in time with where the land is in terms of the local plan process. So there are risks associated. If you were looking to purchase that land in terms of valuing it, there are risks around that land at the moment because it's not got a local plan approved allocation.
Thank you. The second question was, sorry, on the next page, 231, in 8.1, I was just interested in the blip that apparently occurred in 2012 in terms of notional interest. I couldn't quite see how interest rates rose, doubled in that period and then dropped back. But it's not a big deal. I'm just interested.
I'm not sure. All I know is the rate is based upon I think it's a public works loan board 1 to 2 years. It's 1 to 2 year maturity. So I assume that was the rates that were in play at the point that the calculation is done. So you went from 1.1 to 2.18 and then back down. That's the point you're raising, isn't it? Then back down to 1.37. No.
No, I'm not aware of anything in the financial markets that made that happen, so it was just interesting, that's all.
Councillor Tilbury? I was on the Many Down Members Advisory Panel was last year when as was Sean at work. Oh no, just Sean, yeah, that's it. We were told last year that Hampshire County Council were going to pay us the money, which obviously be good news for us because we would get that money back and then we could invest it because, as you can see from the interest rate, we only get the Public Works Loan Board rate of about 1%, which is half of what we're getting on our own money that we're investing. So that's a very poor deal for us. But if you also look at it from the point of view of Hampshire's taxpayers, which is us again, really, isn't it? They're going to end up, if they paid us back tomorrow, they will end up paying nearly £9 million for a £5 million loan, basically. They took out several, in 1996. So at the moment, there's no incentive for them to pay us back because they're paying a very low rate of interest and they'd rather just keep doing that until they get that. But they're just throwing this money at Manydown in the hope that, one day when they get planning permission, that'll be resolved. So we're all losing out on this basis. And as far as I'm aware, this isn't likely to be resolved if nothing happens until, I think it's not until like 2020 or 2019 that we can actually address this, if they haven't paid it by then. But at the moment, this is going to continue. But I thought they were going to pay it back last year. So what's been the delay? That was it. We were assured that they were going to pay it back. Does anyone know anything of what we know why they've still not paid up?
I'll try, Chairman. Obviously, the county have an option they had the option at a fixed price, and they're making slight payments, as you can see, each year. So it comes down a bit. The money to exercise that option is in their capital programme. It's obviously at their discretion when and if they want to exercise that option. So it's for them to determine. And I imagine that they are choosing the appropriate point to exercise that option, depending on how the scheme progresses through the local plan process. So I haven't had a date from them when they're going to pay. I think that they are looking at the local plan process and they would exercise the option when it's most appropriate. I would be surprised if they were earning that on their treasury management cash, though. So they're probably it's probably costing them. In terms of the interest, they're probably paying us more than they're earning on the money. So, but it's at the county council's discretion. Obviously, when they exercise, there is a long stop date, which I can't remember, but it is a long stop date. When if that was hit, then we would be able to that option would fall away. But it's at their discretion.
Any other questions at all? So we're asked to note the consolidated financial statement. I assume that's noted.
and notes that in future many down financial statement will be reported to the overview committee. Question remains from Councillor Keating's comment, rather than or in addition to.
Yeah, so Chair, I would suggest that the committee's amending that to say and to this committee, or something along the lines of and to this committee, so that the report comes to this committee and to the many down one.
If I may, Chair. The point I was making was this is the only committee that looks at financials. So my point was it should come to this committee and then go to them, the overview committee, rather than the other way around. Thank you.
The officers agree that and amend accordingly.
I thank Councillor Tate for taking that paper. I believe that is the end of the papers. There was one error I made right at the beginning. We did send an email round regarding the timing of the meetings. Is there anybody that doesn't like a 2 o'clock start, please say. Excellent, right. Unless there's any immediate problems in the next hour, it's 2 o'clock starts from now on. Thank you. Thank you for turning up. Meeting's closed at 3:25.